everyone. Welcome back. This is How We Innovate at Arizona State University. My name is Brent Siebold. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering. I'm also a huge fan of our student entrepreneurs across the entire university. I've been working with student startups for a long time. Unfortunately, my co-host, who usually joins us on the show, Michael Houle, who's also a huge supporter of student startups, especially in the tech world, and also helping get startups funded and their legal entities in place. He is not with us today, but forget Michael. We've got two amazing founders here that are going to share their amazing stories as startup leaders in the ASU ecosystem, and have now flown the coop, have left the devil's den, and have gone out into the real world of commerce, and are having a great time as far as I can tell. We caught up with these founders just a few months ago, and now I'm thrilled that they've been able to find some time, come into the studio, and share their story with everybody here as part of our How We Innovate podcast. So first up, we have Bella Roos, who is one of my former students in class, but she is a rock star in her own right in the world of fashion. So we're going to hear about what she's been working on. And Kaitlyn Fitzgerald is with us as well. She is practically royalty in the world of innovation at ASU. She was kind of built into the fabric of our changemaker efforts at ASU, which is essentially world recognized. I go to conferences all over the country and around the world, and people know what we do in terms of innovation, in terms of changemaker, Central being a leading student voice. So Kaitlyn has been a key part of that and has been involved in a lot of startups since her time as a student. So thank you to both for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, excited to be here.
Happy to be here, yeah.
I can't tell if they're being serious or not, but we'll just assume that they're being honest and they're really excited to be on set here today in the studio. So Bella, if you don't mind, the way we do things on the show, if you could just kind of bring us back as far as you'd like to go, whether it's, hopefully it's not middle school because that's weird, but maybe even before you joined ASU or while you're at ASU, you had this interest in entrepreneurship, and eventually you and I crossed paths. So if you could kind of walk us through your genesis story with Roos, your fashion brand, we'd love to hear where you've been and where you're going.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned middle school, because I think the first time I actually had the thought cross my mind, I was in about 8th grade, but I do have distinct memories in high school of being like, you know what, I want to create something, and I know I can. Both my parents are entrepreneurs, and I was like, you know, this feels right to me. And I basically realized growing up that I was going to be the last person in my family to ever have my last name if I follow these traditional societal standards of taking someone else's name. And it basically meant that, you know, all my family's stories and ancestors and the funny quirks about us and who gave us that table and plate and what, all of that was just going to kind of end.
Wow.
I'm the only child in my family. I have no cousins.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it was kind of just like, whoa, okay, what do I do with that? And it felt really heavy. I didn't know what to do. And when I was in high school, I was given this heirloom ring, and that my opa, which is my grandfather in Dutch, that he gave to my dad, and then my dad gave to me. And that was kind of the first time I was like, okay, like there's some sort of legacy happening here. This is kind of the only thing I have. And so I had that in mind going into college, and I would wear it all the time. And then fast forward a little bit, I had, you know, this idea brewing of like, maybe I do a clothing brand. I always loved fashion, but I was terrified. I was like, well, I got to do it right. So I was, you know, in my head about it. And when I was a junior, I was in your ENT 360. Yeah, which for anyone who doesn't know, that's basically this incubator course where you spend the whole time practicing your pitch for a venture idea, and by the end you can actually compete and win money. Mm-hmm. I spent the first 8 weeks or so, which was about halfway through, doing some random business idea. It was related to fashion. It was totally an app. It was like a closet organizer or something.
Oh yeah, we had to kill that.
Oh yeah, no, it was totally just to fulfill the assignments. But on the side, I was really starting to think about my clothing brand and legacy and how I could make this work and what it would stand for. And so I would come in early, stay late, always asking you, Brent, questions like, you know, I want to do this brand, da da da. So one day it was probably before or after, I think it was after class, one day, I'm asking you stuff about it, and you're like, so why aren't you doing your brand in this class?
Right, Kaitlyn?
Yep.
Yeah, and I didn't have a good answer. I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I said. I was so scared. And you told me that if I didn't have my first designs and make my first sale by the end of the class, you would fail me.
Jeez.
Which I don't
That's
know if
harsh.
that's a bluff. I don't know if you actually had the ability to do that.
No, I probably wouldn't.
I don't think you could have. But I, as a goody two-shoes straight A student, was petrified, so scared, literally walked home crying through campus. I was sobbing the whole way home. I was like, what am I gonna do? I know you did. But I was so now I'm 8 weeks behind everyone. I'm like, they've all been refining their pitch. How am I gonna compete like that? Yeah. But it was the first time the fire was really lit under me. And it ended up being probably the most pivotal point for me in my college experience.
Wow.
And in those remaining 6 weeks, I got an MVP made. I made 10 of what ended up becoming this hoodie.
Awesome.
But it was way different back then. You know, all of them are pilling now and not good quality. But I sold out of all 10.
Wow.
Was a finalist in the class. Won $100. I was really proud. And it was kind of what set it on fire. And then from there, I ended up doing my thesis for Barrett on the brand. I got all of the legal stuff on that side done. I set up the LLC. So that's how I ended up learning about the legal side and the tax side, was because I did my thesis on it. And then I graduated May 2023 and launched the brand officially in July of 2023.
Wow.
I'm upset nobody told me I could do my Barrett thesis on a business. That is brilliant.
Okay, newsflash to all of our listeners out there, anybody watching, if you haven't yet done your honors thesis at ASU, definitely do it on a venture if you can, because you
Brilliant.
have so many opportunities to do that.
Yeah, and I was really lucky because my thesis director was Rhett Trujillo, and he gave me full creative freedom. He was like, please don't write a 50-page paper. I don't want to read that. That's a waste of my time, waste of your time. So he basically said, do whatever you think you need to get this business going.
That's great.
I feel really lucky. So it was really cool.
That's awesome. So now you're up and running. You've got Roos.com is
Yes.
your domain. You're doing essentially e-commerce.
Yeah, all
And-
direct to consumer online. A
Which
little bit
is-
more about the brand. It's streetwear, unisex. It's meant for everyone. De Roos translates to the rose in Dutch, so hence the rose
Love it.
imagery and all that. But yeah, it's really, I'm trying to find this way forward of connecting with people about legacy, and what does that mean? How do you make someone feel when you walk in a room, when you leave a room? What is your legacy in your everyday?
So Kaitlyn will talk about brand personas and brand stories, and I feel like you've got something there with that connection to legacy, and it goes much deeper than just apparel, right, or streetwear. It goes to really people's roots and how they identify in society with themselves. So it's really cool, but I can imagine it's also really challenging. How do you communicate that in a concise and clear way in the very crowded world of e-commerce, right? And social media as well. So you shared with me when we met a couple months ago that you've been kind of learning through trial and error how to go to market, right, with these products. So any stories from just the last year where you've kind of had any kind of big aha moments or breakthroughs with, showing the product off? I don't know what happened, but the last time we met, you said, hey, I've got this really cool design, and I'm not sure if I keep it to myself and try to bring it to market in a stealth way, or if I kind of share it with my audience. So I'm curious, what was your decision on? Can you backtrack and share with the audience and Kaitlyn what you were battling there and what you ended up doing?
Absolutely. So my goal was to do at least 3 drops between July and December, which I ended up doing. So I did all limited edition drops. The first one was...
For old people watching, a drop is when you introduce a new product.
Yes, when it releases, a little launch, if you will. But yes, a drop, as
So
we'll
cool.
say. So
Yeah.
I did first the hoodie collection, which had this in another color, and then I did 2 hats, and then I did 2 t-shirts. And I had this idea. I've had this other idea. I'm not going to share it, which spoils a little bit
That's
the
okay.
answer to your
it's
question.
It's a really cool. It's an innovative product design.
Yes, it's the first time where I've heard a manufacturer say, I've never seen anyone do this. So that was really rewarding for me, especially in fashion, where I feel it's, at least in my experience, it's been pretty hard to find something that hasn't been tapped into. And so, yeah, essentially I've had this idea for probably over a year now, and I've been trying to figure out how do I do it. It's a bag, I'll say that much, but it's kind of almost a wearable piece in a way that a bag generally isn't, and that's as far as I'll go. But basically, I was really struggling when Brent and I met, and a little bit still, on how early do I introduce this to the market, because I don't want anyone to steal it, especially if their production and, you know, time to go to market, their supply chain, all of that, if theirs is more efficient than mine, which, given how small I am and how long things have taken so far, it probably would be. So I've really struggled with, you know, do I get the product education now and create the hype? Because people don't know what it is. They need to understand how it works.
Right.
So I need that lead up, but I don't want too much lead up. So ironically, I have the next 3 versions of my sample delivering today.
Oh.
So I made a prototype on my own with a friend who has a sewing machine, and then I've had 2 samples from there with my manufacturer, and both were not at all up to standard. Oh. So he's since made 3 versions from there that are delivering today. So I'm hoping I can start to work on this product education and make it public soon. But yeah, it's a struggle I'm still trying to find the balance with of, you know, where do you draw the line? Because frankly, it's not like I'm a huge brand, so the likelihood of someone stealing it's pretty low. But because I'm not huge, if they steal it, no one would know where it really came from. So I'm really trying to find that balance, and I think once I know I have the product and it's exactly how I want it, then I can backtrack and take people through that process of getting there, but I know I already have it and I know when it's coming. Because that was another issue I ran into with my 3 drops last year, where everything was always late, way later than I expected. And, you know, I do manufacturing overseas, which was a hard decision for me because I would have loved to do it here. I actually did the hats here, I'll say, but it went so terribly that I went back to overseas after that. And there's just such a long lead time with trying to get things made overseas, and literally every single thing has been delayed. And so I was like, okay, with this, if I'm going to do it right, I need to have it all in hand before I even start the marketing. So it's a little bit of a slower process before my next drop, but yeah, I'm still trying to find that balance.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing the update. And obviously, doing a startup, being an innovator, there's always these wrestling matches that happen in your head and happen with the co-founders and happen with your mentors in terms of strategy and how to best take that next step, because it's never been done before. You're building something, a brand or a product in this case, that's never been built before, and you're in the driver's seat, and there's a lot of forks in the road almost daily according to many entrepreneurs. So maybe, I'm sure Kaitlyn actually has some opinions on strategy, but before we come back to where you are and your prototype being delivered this afternoon, we're gonna follow her home so you can see what this is all about. But before we get into having, I think, a much deeper conversation about where you are now and where you're going, I'd love to hear from Kaitlyn, because I think she's going to be able to add to this in terms of where we're all going. Kaitlyn's going as a business owner, and you're going as a brand director and business owner. So, Kaitlyn, do you mind sharing with Bella and our whole audience your backstory at ASU and beyond?
Yeah, well, I mean, I came into ASU with a completely different objective than what I walked out of ASU with. I came in, I had a nonprofit track. I was really committed to that. Social impact is a driving tenet for me. It's what motivates me. Wow. You said you didn't want to go back to middle school? Because I could go even further.
Yeah.
Just a lot of experiences I had as a child. My mom has Parkinson's disease. We lost my brother to the opioid epidemic. And those early childhood experiences have a way of creating a strong sense of empathy and a driver to be a part of the change. You know, as overused as that phrase can be, it's very real. So what ASU did for me is introduce this idea that business can be a vehicle for good. That business has in a lot of ways, more potential than a lot of our traditional like avenues for making the world better. Business has this ability to scale. It has the ability to challenge status quos.
Right.
And that is interesting to me. I love a little controversy, right? And so got very involved at ASU. It's funny that you talk about a class towards the end of your career here, because I also took a class at the end of my career here, also for a business that I do not run anymore. The class was with Sydney Peck, and it also was very formulative to me in how I understood the realities. I still remember the business model canvas that was sitting in front of me and being like, oh, okay, so there's the market availability and how you address it, and just seeing the anatomy of a business plan was very fascinating.
Yeah.
I was fortunate because right out of school, as soon as I left school, I got a great opportunity to go into a really cool startup, a very purpose-driven startup that had the potential to not just scale, but to scale globally, right? And they're still at it. Source Global, they're an incredible company. They make water from sunlight and air, and some of our initial projects were with refugees. And I have a background working with refugees, so I was very excited about that. For students who are passionate about entrepreneurship, maybe don't have a venture right now, and are trying to figure out what's the right path for me to stay involved in this ecosystem after ASU, I cannot encourage you enough to spend your early years in your career on the ground in a startup trying to build a business. You'll wear so many hats, you'll get so many experiences, and nothing will prepare you to be an entrepreneur more than trying to be on an entrepreneurial team, right? To be working hand in hand with an experienced entrepreneur. So I spent a few years doing that. It was incredible. My role in that company was head of marketing. And we went from a couple countries to like 55 by the time I left. And we had these marketing hubs and teams all over the world and distributors and partners. And so we were, it was that balance of how do you build a brand to begin with, and then how do you scale a brand and maintain that authenticity as you grow. I mean, it was very cool.
Yeah.
In order to build that brand, in order to reach those milestones, we worked with marketing agencies. My degree was not in marketing. My background is not in marketing, although I would say that through some of the projects I did at ASU, I was very involved in the marketing side. But working at this company, we needed to bring in partners who had a lot of experience and had all the tools and the skills. But as a startup that was rapidly growing, was purpose-driven, and was introducing something fundamentally new and disruptive to the world, this idea that your drinking water can come from the air, that was apparently a very difficult task for our agency partners to rise to.
Wow.
And we had kind of a revolving door. We were kind of working with a lot of different ones to try to get to the secret sauce, that exact intersection of commercial branding and social impact that represented what we were building. And it was frustrating. It was very hard. We got some agencies do great work, but we were jigsawing together pieces from a bunch of different places. When I left the company very interested in being a different type of marketing partner. I love working with startups. I knew I wanted to stay in the ecosystem, and I wanted to solve for what I couldn't find for myself. I wanted to find and build a team that could truly understand the needs of a startup, could truly speak to the impact, could really get into the heads of a founder, right? Because as a founder, your vision and your impact's very clear, but the path to getting there and translating that vision to anybody else, especially in the technical side, is very hard, right? Yeah. And this was something I learned how to do. And so that's what we set out to do. We set out to be a company that would be the ideal partner to emerging industries and emerging brands.
Wow.
My team and I got our start actually in a very interesting, fast-moving, regulated space, which is the cannabis industry. We started working together. I met them, I was freelancing and consulting on my own, and they were working on a neighbor farm, and the two farms we worked together sometimes. But I was watching their work, and I was so impressed by it because they were building universes for the products and the brands that they were working with. But they needed a strategist, and I needed a creative team, and so it was really a match made in heaven. We decided to come together at this very cool, interesting industry event, and we were like, we are a perfect fit. What are we doing? Working independent one another. We can achieve so much more and actually have a bigger impact if we work together. So We formed in officially August 2022, but we decided to form in December 2021. It's been an interesting journey, especially operating a marketing agency in a post-pandemic era. Where, marketing, when you're in a financially uncertain time, marketing, as they say, is the first thing to get cut.
Yeah.
It is not recession-proof as a provider, right? So we go in and we have this vision for being an ideal partner for scaling ventures. And then we hit, especially last year, this economic moment where businesses didn't know what was happening next. There was this, are we in a recession? Is it inflation? Is it both? Can it be both? Does that make sense? Everybody's trying to figure it out and nobody knows what's about to happen. And honestly, our demand started to dry up. And we realized that while people needed what we had to offer, they didn't have the resources for it. And sometimes when you're building a business and you're looking at product market fit, it's not just that you're solving a problem, it's can the people you're solving the problem for actually afford the solution? Like what are those resources? So we had to sit and we'd rethink it all and really sit and say, okay, in this moment in time, in this economic context, what are we going to do to serve emerging brands and emerging industries? Because they can't afford a full set of things like we want to offer.
Right.
So we had to pivot our products, and we did. And we right-sized things, and we got really scrappy, and it carried us through. And we found, especially towards quarter 3 last year, things started to shift. We started to feel the market picking back up. And the moves that we had made to stay in existence actually were the same moves that delivered us to the exact clients we were looking for to begin with. And we've now had this wonderful opportunity to partner, truly scale with some of the most exciting and incredible startups I've had the privilege of working with. So that's where we are today.
That's fantastic.
Wow.
Kudos.
Thank you.
And the company is Magic.
Magic branding. Yep.
Love it.
Yeah, but the part of that whole pivot, we're here talking about innovation, right? So we started in the cannabis space. We started working in plant medicine, and our name was Magic Plant, right? That's a very kind of obvious, cool, fun name. Well, when we started expanding back into the startup ecosystem, I'd hand out a card, and they'd look at it and they'd be like, you know what this looks like, right? And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm proud. And so we had to shift. We had to rename ourselves. We had to go from Magic Plant to Magic Branding.
Okay.
Because we had to speak to the full set of what we were doing. And all of that is layered with market conditions. And, I loved the name Magic Plant. Did not want to let it go.
Yeah.
And, personal feelings and all those other things that go with it. But, being open-minded, understanding the context, and really, at the end of the day, realizing that what you're building and your brand are there to help you serve the people you're trying to serve, makes it easier to get through some of those innovative decisions that are pretty tough.
That's great. So good. You guys are both representing Magic Plants. We've got the Roos, and we've got the pot.
I will say only about half of our clients right now are in that space.
That was going to be my next question. So as you've expanded your aperture in terms of who you're serving, in terms of startup clients, is there another sector that you've kind of seen really start to bubble up on your client list?
There's 2 spaces that are really interesting to us right now. One, of course, is climate technology and climate addressing businesses in general, right?
Yeah.
That's where my roots are. It's one of the most pressing needs the world has. And there's some of the most exciting things, and there's funding there, right?
Yeah.
So that means that we have the opportunity to do more with our clients. And then the other space that's really cool is the future of work. We have a client right now, Nova Chief of Staff, and they're building a Chief of Staff education platform because at a lot of the traditional education avenues, we're not teaching people or preparing them to be chiefs of staff. It's so new to business.
Yeah.
And so that's a really cool one as well.
Who would have known? Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Chief of staff. It's a lot of HR issues, I would imagine, in that area.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, appreciate you both sharing your stories, your journeys that you've had, both at ASU and outside of ASU. We have a little bit of a case study on the table. We're not going to go into too much detail on Bella's product design, but going back to that where we left off before we heard your story, Kaitlyn, what was your reaction to Bella's quandary at the moment in terms of going either stealth with the product or... I mean, this is a conversation we have inside of ASU startup innovation all the time, right? Do you go stealth, or Do you put it out there for the marketplace to comment on and, rip-off artists be damned? We're going to let somebody steal our product knowing that, we're going to drive it. It's ours. We're going to find a way to win in the long run. So Kaitlyn, I was just curious if you had a take on Bella's situation.
Kind of always. I'm a bit of a talker and a thinker.
I knew you did.
I think it's important when you're thinking about marketing and branding that, I heard something in your story that I resonated with deeply. You were like, I wanted to do this the right way. And I think a lot of us are like, I want to do it the right way. There must be a single right way to do it. And I think the reality, which is a lot harder for a lot of us entrepreneurs to accept, we tend to be black and white people, is that there is no one right way. There's no silver bullet. What there is a strategy that addresses the risk and considers the opportunity, and then you just go execute on it, right? So as long as you're sitting there, you're thinking about all of the options, you're thinking of all of the risks, and you're building plans to address those, then you will have a great path forward. Now, my first thought when I heard that is, can you patent that?
Yeah.
And because marketing, we're talking about go-to-market strategy, but all these pieces of business are interrelated. So the legal side is where I initially went.
Right.
I've spoken with an attorney about patenting it, and there's a lot of complications in patenting fashion. It's very difficult, and the best thing I could find that could be an option is something called a distinctive patent, which is like the red bottoms on Louboutin shoes or things like that. But you can't do that until you've proven that to be a recognizable trait of your company.
Interesting.
Which is, so you kind of have to work backwards for that. And in order to patent a design, it's, from what this attorney told me, it's almost impossible. Like, you could go buy a Chanel dress and copy the exact pattern of fabric and sewing and everything, and they can't do anything. Supposedly. So
Interesting.
that was also where my head
I'm
went
sure, yeah.
first as well. And so the
Sure.
alternative, was my thought is to just really promote this as, the original of this thing and try and get connected with people to the point where even if there are knockoffs, of course some people go to that, but that they're like, well, I want to support where this originally came from.
So there's another angle of this story that I was really looking forward to chatting with both of you about. And I think when we got together individually a few months ago, this came up in terms of what I'm seeing in the ASU community of people that are developing new products and certainly new brands like both of you have, is leveraging the power of social media to kind of have that direct conversation with the market that you're trying to impact. And in fact, on How We Innovate at ASU, we had an episode earlier in this season where we invited in a student founder who's in the fashion domain. You actually were at that episode, Easton Dana. And he told a story of, his breakthrough with his brand in the market, leveraging social media, was when he put out a post where he basically broke down in tears. Remember this story? Where he was like, hey, I don't know if I'm doing this right or for the right reasons. And he just got this outpouring of support back via his social media channels. So that was kind of where my head went. So I'm curious of both your reactions about being almost authentic to a fault, not to put words in Easton's mouth, but, really putting yourself out there and saying, hey, I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but I'm going to lay all my cards on the table for my market, for the people that are really a fan of my brand or of my agency, and say, here's where we are. I'd love your opinion. I'd love for you guys to help me make a decision or be a part of this journey with me. And I'll say one last thing. You brought up the business model canvas, right, as a tool of managing a lot of these strategic decisions that you have as you're building a company. And that's actually one of the tenets we don't talk a lot about in the world of lean startup methodology, is putting your ego and your fears aside to the extent that you're willing to bring the marketplace into the back room of your company, right? So I'm not telling you what to do, Bella, but this is just, my vote would be, we can't, necessarily be too scared of the copycats, because even with the patent, anybody that owns a patent will tell you, hey, I've been ripped off, a couple different times overseas or by this person over here or this person over here. But I'm really curious because you guys are natives. I'm not digital natives in the world of social media. Like, what is your reaction to that? Because as somebody sitting on the sidelines watching successful entrepreneurs like you two and like Easton leverage social media to kind of get, really connect with the market in ways that have never been possible before, it seems like a really interesting opportunity that you have specifically with this new product that prior entrepreneurs that wouldn't even been on the table, right? It's like, no, we got to figure this out in the boardroom, and then we'll let our customers in on it when we feel the time is right. So I just feel like there's a little bit of a battle between the old school, not to say stealth is old school, but there was a time where that's all there was, right? To now, you have an opportunity to potentially, if it's in tune with, your vision for the brand. Love to hear your reaction to that hypothesis.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into social media, and something that I think I completely overestimated after graduating and being like, yeah, I'm going to launch this brand right away, is how vulnerable that really is. And it's been...
Are you doing your own social?
I do. And it is so scary. Like, it is really hard.
I'm right there with you.
It's a full-time job in and of itself, just planning what you're going to film and when you're going to film, and then actually filming and then editing and then posting it, and then it flops and you're like, why did I spend all that time doing that? So it's honestly been probably one of my biggest roadblocks, not just with the business, but for me personally, and trying to remove myself from anything that results from it, because there are so many people who, amazingly blow up overnight, and they get this success, and I am so happy for them, of course.
Your dad included.
Yeah, my dad is TikTok famous. So it's like, it's happening, and there's also, for every person like that, there's hundreds trying who we don't see, who aren't making it, and so it can become really hard to not compare yourself when you're seeing this. And so I've been struggling with that on a personal level. And, you're right, there's not one way to do things. And as a perfectionist, sometimes I get in my head of like, well, okay, they're doing this, so then how do I do this? So then this, because that needs to convert to these sales and da-da-da-da. And what I've recently come to terms with is the goal with social media shouldn't be to convert, it should be to build a community. And I've struggled getting to that, and not especially as a direct-to-consumer online brand. So much of it feels like I have to convert, I have to get people into the brand, I want to buy from it, and I've really had to try to remove myself from that, and it's still something I'm learning and trying to work on.
I get it. The fact that you're able to recognize that as a challenge for yourself that's the first step, right? The 12-step process of entrepreneurship.
Well, and that's a huge deal to be able to, as a founder, where, a lot of your livelihood is tied to the success of this business. You're thinking, how am I going to pay that next bill? How am I going to fuel that growth? And how am I going to get those sales most directly? And here we have social media, which is supposed to be a direct connection to an audience. So you're like, this should be driving sales. But what has to happen is that same interaction that we have when we build relationships with friends, family, people around us, right? At the end of the day, it's not an account on the other side of, that phone. It's a human. And a lot of marketers will come out and make big promises, and they're talking about hacking the market to deliver you sales. The way I see it and the way we operate is that your audience are people that you're building a relationship with. And we have to be thoughtful and considerate of what needs to go into that relationship. How do we give them value through that relationship so they keep coming back? So I'm so glad to hear that you're seeing it as a community. That's absolutely a strong approach to be taking. Is one where you don't have to rely on luck, right? And as entrepreneurs, we cannot rely on luck. But what's also really interesting is the point that you made, like how tied to the likes and the shares and the reposts that we can be. And as entrepreneurs, it's so hard to see your business as outside of yourself. You are not your business, right? And that's like 10 therapy sessions I've been through, right? Where you're like, I am fine, even if the business is having a hard moment, and vice versa. And so decoupling that attachment to the outcomes on social media can be actually the thing that unlocks more engagement, because you're more free, you're more confident, and you're just like, this is me, I'm doing it, whatever. Whatever happens. And And going back to the lean launch methodology, that's what's so interesting about doing business today. So a funny story is, I mean, again, I mentioned I was in Sydney Peck's class.
Yeah.
And she'll be the first person to tell you to get out there, go into the market, let your fears go, and be willing to ask the questions of people. So when
Trying
I was
to get Bella to do that too. But
oh, it's so hard.
I did a little bit. I dabbled.
It is.
It is. It's so hard.
When I was at Source, which was Zero Mass at the time, we didn't know what to call the thing, the technology. We were like, how do you even describe this new to the world thing?
Right.
So we had, names that we had thought of and ideated on. And I walked into a grocery store on McDowell Road with these papers where I had these names printed. And I walked up to strangers and I said, what do you think of this and what do you think it means? And I got kicked out of the grocery store. So then I went to Home Depot. I got kicked out of like 3 or 4 stores. So you can't do this here. And I wasn't a student at the time. I think I was like, but I'm a student. Because that's the advantage of being a student is people are a lot more likely to be patient with you and want to play that game. But so that's what we had to do back in 2016. Fast forward 2023, you can do that exact same market testing, get that exact same type of feedback at scale from your phone without having to get kicked out of any stores. And that's really special.
Yeah.
And so getting the opportunity to let the market tell you what they like and don't like is a really interesting use of social media and is only possible when you can decouple the attachment to those outcomes.
It's very hard to do.
So hard.
Yeah.
I struggle with this. It's like a leap of faith, right? You do that every single day. You tell yourself, I am not my business every single day.
It's a mantra.
Yeah.
It's hard to do when you name the business after your family, and your family line is gonna die with you. There's a lot of pressure here,
I
Kaitlyn.
did end up putting a lot of pressure on it inadvertently, and I've struggled with that exact thing.
You will
so.
persevere because of the family, because of the legacy.
Yeah.
You have no choice.
Yeah.
You've built this house, and now you're gonna make it thrive. So,
Thank you.
I want to wrap up today by talking about something we talk about quite a bit on this show is the power of mentorship. We've gone through great lengths to build a community of mentors at ASU in the world of venture development within engineering across the university. So I'm just curious to hear from both of you. And we've heard a little bit about it, right? So working for a startup, you're mentored by founders, you're mentored by other seasoned operators. You've shared with me you've met some really amazing people in the e-commerce community that have helped you along the way. We mentioned your dad, who's kind of online impresario of sorts. But if you don't mind, maybe we could wrap up by sharing any tips you have for the audience related to, hey, I want to do something, whether I'm in class or I already have access to support at ASU or other places. Where can I go to make it feel like I'm not out on my own trying to build something that's never been built before? So, Kaitlyn, do you mind sharing any takeaways that you've had?
Well, for students who are still students, take advantage of every single resource you can find here. Even if it doesn't feel like an exact right fit, you will not have that set of resources when you leave the university. It's magical what you can access here. And build relationships with them, right? So Sydney Peck was my professor, but we'd also worked together when I was working at Changemaker Central. And she's somebody, I just got lunch with her last week. So she's somebody that we have had an evolving relationship, and she's mentored me through some really key moments in my life and in my career. And so nurturing those and keeping those and holding on to them and recognizing that your relationships will take all sorts of interesting turns and that the people around you are the people that will advocate for you in the rooms that you're not in. That is everything, right? And then showing up is huge. I am, it probably doesn't seem like it, but I'm an ambivert. I'm an introvert, right? I don't always love to walk into a room full of people and have to engage in a conversation with people I don't know. That's like one of the hardest parts about networking and being an entrepreneur. But if you can just tell yourself that you're going to show up 5 times. I'm going to go to 5 events. I'm going to be at 1 event a week. I'm just going to do it and show up. Actually showing up is the thing you need to do. And here locally in Phoenix, we have a remarkable event that takes place every Thursday, it's wonderful, especially for folks who are in that early stage, called Venture Cafe.
Yeah.
Happens downtown. It's a CEI. ASU plays a role in it, and it is a gathering where you can learn. There's sessions, and you can just connect with people, and it is a relaxed, friendly environment. Everybody has a name tag with a number that says how many times they've been there. You want to start a conversation, all you do is go talk about somebody's number. And so show up and build relationships. It's really key.
That's great advice. Great name drops too. I just want to give a shout out. You mentioned Sydney Peck. She's one of my she was such a key collaborator. In fact, the only reason I was able to have Bella in my entrepreneurship class is because of Sydney. Sydney was based in WP Carey. I was in engineering, and she was the architect that brought the two schools together. So she's great.
She is.
Yeah. And good shout out to Venture Cafe. Amazing resource we have currently. So, Bella, any takeaways from outside of the classroom? What have you been doing recently to make sure that you feel supported from a business development standpoint?
I would say you touched on it a bit without saying the word, just finding where you can hold yourself accountable and getting people around you who are supportive, but also who can be your accountability buddy. And whether that's another person starting a venture, another entrepreneur, and you're checking in with each other, or if it's just your friend or a parent or a teacher or whatever, like anyone where you can be like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do, and now someone's gonna ask you about it, so if you didn't do it, you really feel, okay, I need to get on it. So I think for me, the lack of structure after graduating and then going straight into an entrepreneurial venture was very difficult. Yeah. I did not feel warned or prepared for that transition at all. So if you are about to graduate and you're thinking of going into that, you can do it, but finding ways to create structure for yourself and hold yourself accountable, I think, is key.
Yeah. We did talk about putting together like a group, right, to help you with that accountability circle. And we didn't do it. We just let it.
You needed an accountability buddy to put the accountability group together. Yeah. But that accountability thing is huge. I could, as you're saying that, I'm like, I have a meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. with an accountability buddy. We may be building something together.
That's early.
But it is early. But she's on the East Coast. It is everything, because you wake up in the morning and you don't have a boss to tell you if you don't do these things, you're fired. You wake up and you're like, I could watch TV. I could go back to sleep. I could walk my dog. All of those things are a lot easier than what I really need to do today. And that accountability buddy is the one pressure that gets you outside of your head.
Yeah.
So do you have your crew? Do you have that group? And you don't have to name names, obviously, but we want to support you, right, Kaitlyn?
Absolutely.
Because we hear about these. I mean, Venture Cafe, I'm sure, is one place where you hear these smaller groups will kind of almost name themselves. I'm thinking of like 3 or 4 different names of like kind of hackers that get together, or business owners. And I just want to make sure you've got a crew right now, because if not, this is something we'd like to help with.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would. I don't feel I have a specific one in the business world or with other entrepreneurs. So I'm still on the hunt for that. I have figured out, ways that the people just personally close to me have been able to help with that, but it's something I'm still working on for sure.
Good to know.
We'll have to set up a call.
Yeah, perfect.
Here we go. Awesome. Well, thank you both again for your time coming back to campus today.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you having you both in the studio. So on behalf of Michael Houle, my co-host, and our sponsor at Houle Curry Law for How We Innovate at ASU at the Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering, really excited to have both you business whizzes in on how we innovate and sharing your stories. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brent.
All right, we'll see you next time. How We Innovate at ASU. Go Devils.